Home Digital FM 99.9 in Brikama Town. For all the businessmen and women, move out of the darkness, follow the light. Come sell your business with us today. Home Digital FM, let your customers know what you're offering. Be on top of your competitors. Home Digital FM, we will help you stand out. Come advertise with us today for all your businesses. We offer live program coverage both on Facebook Live and on the radio. Exos to sell your products and services. The media is in control. Tell your customers when, where, and how to meet you through Home Digital FM. Don't worry. Do your business. We will sell you out. Call us today on 734-3125 or 200-5770 620-1413 766-8394. Home Digital FM. Follow the light.
Africa This Week, a new program that features and analyzes all the top news and events that took place across the continent during the week, is coming on Home Digital FM. The 1 hour week in review program will exhibit experts and commentators to look back on the news of the past 7 days and break down stories and issues across Africa that everyone is talking about. Africa This Week will feature guest of the week and engage people at the center of every key news, every story in the best interactive, entertaining, and informative way possible. Africa This Week on Home Digital FM 99.9 every Saturday from 5 p.m. to 6 p.m. starting from next Saturday, October 22nd. Africa This Week with me, Bojang Jnr. See you there. Hello and a very warm welcome to your week in review program Africa This Week, looking at the continent's top stories over the last 7 days. Coming up in this edition, a scuffle broke out in Sierra Leone's parliament as MPs exchanged blows and threw chairs at each other following a heated parliamentary debate on proportional representation. Ghana's embattled finance minister apologized to Ghanaians for the country's ongoing economic hardship.
Let me use this opportunity to say to the Ghanaian people what I believe. With courage, every finance minister around the world may wish to say to their people now, I am truly sorry.
The French embassy in Burkina Faso asked the Burkinabe government for more protection after violent anti-French protests targeted the property last week. Mali's military rulers banned all NGOs that are funded or supported by France from operating in Mali. And as WHO unveiled a new strategy to tackle anti-malarial drug resistance in Africa, Youssou N'Dour, Senegal's iconic singer and long-time campaigner for malaria prevention, will tell us why he decided to throw his weight behind malaria eradication in his country.
Malaria affects our economy. We talk about $12 billion a year. We want to be developed. We want to be moving forward.
Elsewhere on the continent, Malawi's Anti-Corruption Bureau arrested the country's vice president over alleged corruption. South Africa's Supreme Court of Appeal ordered that former President Jacob Zuma be sent back to prison to finish his sentence for contempt of court, ruling that the decision to release him on early medical parole was unlawful. An 80-year-old President Teodoro Obiangema, who has been ruling Equatorial Guinea for the past 43 years, is on course to a sixth presidential term after preliminary results from last Sunday's election give him at least 96.5% of the votes counted. We'll join a prominent lawyer from Equatorial Guinea for more. In sports, Senegal beat Qatar in their second World Cup game after losing to the Netherlands. We'll hear from fans from Cameroon and Ghana as well, who both lost their openers. Also coming up, our special guest, a former Nigerian senator who was one time a lead negotiator between Boko Haram and the Nigerian government, will discuss with us the rise and change of tactics of the insurgency group.
It is once in a city in northern Nigeria, and it has spread to Cameroon, Chad, and Niger Republic, and if care is not taken, it can spill over up to Sudan and Central African Republic.
These and more on today's program. Stay with us.
Africa This Week, coming to you from Home Digital 99.9 FM in the heart of Brikama.
Sheriff Bojang Jnr.
Thanks for joining us. A fight on Wednesday broke out in Sierra Leone's parliament in Freetown while MPs were in session. They debated a proposed change to the electoral system to allow for proportional representation in next year's election. In a video footage posted online, lawmakers from the ruling Sierra Leone People's Party (SLPP) and the main opposition All People's Congress (APC) could be seen exchanging blows and throwing chairs at each other. Sierra Leone's Electoral Commission advised switching to a proportional representation system for next year's local and parliamentary elections, excluding presidential polls. But the opposition claimed the move would be unconstitutional. According to local reports, the police intervened to calm down the riotous scene at the parliament and expel the disruptive MPs from the chamber. Here is a soundbite of the brawl. Sierra Leonean MPs fighting during a parliamentary debate in Freetown. Ghana's embattled finance minister Ken Ofori-Atta has apologized to Ghanaians for the country's ongoing economic hardship characterized by skyrocketing fuel prices, a rising cost of living and depreciation of the local currency, the cedi. Many Ghanaians across political divide have blamed the crisis on the minister's policies and have been mounting pressure on him to resign or be sacked by the president. But appearing before a parliamentary ad hoc committee probing the motion of censure against him, Ofori-Atta apologized to the nation but failed to take responsibility for the economic pain and hardships Ghanaians have been going through.
Today, I acknowledge our economy is facing difficulties and the people of Ghana are enduring hardships. As a person President Akufo-Addo has put in charge of this economy, I feel the pain personally, professionally, and in my soul. I see and feel the terrible impact of rising prices of goods and services on the lives and livelihoods of ordinary Ghanaians. I feel the stress of running a business, but it is the strength and perseverance of the Ghanaian people that inspire me and my colleagues in government every morning. Coaches, let me use this opportunity to say to the Ghanaian people what I believe. With courage, every finance minister around the world may wish to say to their people now. I am truly sorry.
Ghana's embattled Finance Minister Ken Ofori-Atta. For more on Ofori-Atta's apology and its impact on the population, we are joined by a multiple award-winning Ghanaian journalist, Prince Appiah, on the line from Kumasi in the Ashanti region of Ghana.
His apology was widely not accepted, if I should put it that way, by the people of Ghana. A lot of people were highly disappointed for a long time in him, especially after the majority MPs had come out to hold a press conference on two separate occasions to call for his resignation, or else they will boycott government's business in Parliament. They were surprised that he was still at post, and so for the apology he made, he rendered the other day at the committee, a majority of Ghanaians were not happy about. The Ghanaian people are easy to, share some sympathy and accept one's fault, but the finance minister's action for a while now has been something that majority of the people detest.
And Prince, throughout this month in particular, there have been a lot of public pressure for Ofori-Atta to resign. The majority of the ruling party lawmakers have called on the president to compel him to resign or sack him. One might have assumed that he would use the parliamentary appearance to announce his resignation, but he showed no sign of doing that. Do we know why he is staying put despite increasing public pressure against him and the fact that Ghanaians continue to pang in pain under economic hardships?
Immediately after the committee, some journalists had opportunity to ask him some few questions, and one of the questions they asked him is whether he's going to still be at post to read or present the budget to Parliament. And he answered in affirmative, which means that he's still not ready to resign anytime soon, until perhaps after the presentation of the budget, if the committee that is pushing for his censure succeed in doing so. Remember that President Nana Akufo-Addo, after the majority MPs pushed and held that press conference for him to resign, one of the things he said was that they should allow him to finish presenting the budget first before we think about the censure or he resigning. And so perhaps he's sticking to what the president have said. Nobody knows.
Ghanaian journalist Prince Appiah on the line from Kumasi in Ghana. Nigerian President Muhammadu Buhari on Wednesday introduced a new design for the Naira currency notes aiming to curb the use of excess amount of cash and combat crime. President Buhari and top cabinet members, including officials of the Central Bank and the Anti-Graft Agency, attended the official launch of the redesigned 200, 500 and 1,000 Naira bills at the presidential villa in Abuja. Here is a soundbite of the president during the launch of the new banknotes.
There was an urgent need to take control of currency in circulation and to address the hoarding of Naira banknotes outside the banking system, the shortage of clean and fit banknotes in circulation, and the increase in counterfeiting of high-denomination Naira banknotes. It is on this basis that I gave my approval for the redesign of the 200 Naira, 500 Naira, and 1,000 Naira banknotes.
Nigerian President Muhammadu Buhari. The French embassy in Burkina Faso has asked the Burkinabe government for more protection after violent protests targeted the property last week. This is according to Reuters, quoting a letter to the government and a diplomatic source. In a letter to Burkina Faso's foreign minister, the news agency said it so. The French embassy said Burkina Faso's military police did nothing on November 18 as hundreds of protesters violently attacked the embassy, throwing stones and other projectiles at its walls. It also said some of the officers charged with protecting the embassy were captured on video playing cards as the protest unfolded. Anti-French sentiment and protests have surged this year in Burkina Faso, a former French colony where France maintains strong ties and has special forces stationed. Some of the protesters marched to the gates of the French military base demanding soldiers to leave. A Reuters diplomatic source said the embassy sent a letter to the authorities last weekend asking them to respect the international conventions on the protection of diplomatic enclaves and to increase security around the embassy. Well, across the border in Mali, the military rulers have banned all non-governmental organizations that are funded or supported by France from operating in the country. Humanitarian groups are also included in the ban, according to officials. In a statement, the junta said the move followed France's decision to stop development aid over Bamako's alleged use of paramilitaries from the Russian Wagner Group. The announcement came a few days after Ivory Coast, the UK and Germany also announced they would pull their troops from the peacekeeping and stabilization mission in Mali, or MINUSMA. For more on these planned withdrawals of peacekeeping troops and what it means for Mali, here is Bram Postumus, a veteran Dutch journalist who has been covering and living in Mali for more than a decade.
I think we need to unpack a little bit the reasons why these various countries are withdrawing their troops. Although the statement didn't mention that, but obviously the Ivorian withdrawal has got everything to do with the issue of the 46 hostages still remaining in Bamako, which the Malian government accuses of being mercenaries, which, as we all know, the Ivorians deny. The Germans have been in Mali for a considerably longer time than the English, but I think for both Germany and the UK, it's everything to do with the presence of Wagner mercenaries in Mali. Both countries are of the opinion that the presence of Russian mercenaries is incompatible with their presence in Mali. What that means for the peacekeeping operation, I think it severely weakens the peacekeeping operation. And I think that suits the Malian junta quite well because they don't want it there. They've made that quite obvious with both their attack on the Ivorian contingent and the fact that they welcomed the, well, not with so many words, obviously, but through their various propaganda channels, welcomed the departure of specifically the German and English contingents. They didn't really say, we regret your leaving, but they had people on social media saying goodbye and good riddance. And obviously this is all connected with the fact that they are partnering with an outfit, the Wagner mercenary outfit that I mentioned earlier, which has been given free rein to do as it pleases in Mali. So that's what it is. It's a weaker MINUSMA. It suits the authorities in Bamako because they don't want it there, and it may well hasten the end of the peacekeeping mission, which, you know, to all intents and purposes, didn't have a peace to keep or a country to stabilize, because neither of these conditions apply to Mali.
Do we see Wagner as replacement for MINUSMA in the areas of stabilizing Mali or even winning the fight for the Malian authorities, for the Malian regime?
Well, quite clearly, Wagner doesn't fit into these plans and schemes at all, because Wagner is a completely different beast from all the others that have been there. All of the other missions that have gone into Mali, and we can debate about, you know, their success rate, which I consider very low, both with the French and the Europeans and the UN and all that. But obviously, these missions were taxpayer funded. They were paid for by the tax-paying public in the United States in the case of the UN, and in Europe in the case of the UN, and of course by the French and the other taxpayers where their troops were directly involved. Wagner is no such thing. Wagner is a business, and therefore it operates on a completely different premise. It's not there to solve the problem. It's there to perpetuate its business and get paid for what it considers its main job, which is killing unarmed civilians.
And Bram, how present is Wagner in Mali? Has its presence and role in Mali, activities in Mali, been exaggerated by especially the West?
Well, I think you have a point there in the sense that the focus on Wagner by especially Western media is a bit of an exaggeration in the sense that they hardly talk about anything else when you're talking about Mali. And obviously there is an incredible amount of stuff you can talk about in Mali besides Wagner. So I think the focus on Wagner has been an exaggeration. Their presence amounts to about 1,300 men. They have been spotted in regions like Ségou, Timbuktu, and further east, not in Gao itself, but in that area as well. And so, yes, they are a presence. Obviously, they are at the airport, Bamako Sinou Airport. That's where they also have a base. And ironically, that's not terribly far from where MINUSMA has its base, which is in the same part of town, but off the airport.
Bram Postumus, a veteran Dutch journalist and expert on Mali. West African leaders on Tuesday met in the Ghanaian capital Accra to discuss terrorism and worsening security in the region. The Accra Initiative members, which include Benin, Burkina Faso, Ivory Coast and Togo, were discussing preventing spillover of terrorism from the Sahel. The Accra Initiative is a cooperative and collaborative security mechanism between 7 West African countries as they face increasing threats and attacks from Islamist militants across their northern borders in Burkina Faso and Niger. Ben Dere, the executive secretary of the initiative, catalogued the consensus of the meeting.
At the end of the summit, the heads of state expressed their deep concern for the dramatic expansion of terrorism, violent extremism, and transnational organized crime and transhuman consequences in the Accra Initiative countries. Expressed their sympathy and full support to the member states and their populations who face violent extremism and terrorism on a daily basis. Took note of the commitments by partners to support the Accra Initiative in the fight against terrorism in the sub-region. Reaffirmed their commitment to mobilize the necessary indigenous resources to operationalize within a month the multinational joint task force of the Accra Initiative.
Ben Dere is executive secretary of the Accra Alliance, a sub-regional initiative with the aim of curbing the spread of terrorism in the Sahel. This year's World Antimicrobial Awareness Week, which was marked 18th to the 24th of November, focused on the urgent actions needed to stop antimicrobial resistance. AMR contributes to more than 5 million deaths from bacterial infections alone each year, according to the WHO. It occurs when bacteria, viruses, fungi, and parasites no longer respond to antimicrobial agents. In a statement, WHO's Director General Tedros Adhanom Ghebreyesus said AMR is one of the biggest threats to global health.
Each year, AMR is estimated to contribute to more than 5 million deaths globally. Antimicrobials are the backbone of modern medicine, but their misuse and overuse in humans, animals, and plants is driving the emergence and spread of resistance. This means that infections we could once treat may instead lead to severe illness or death. Responding to the threat of AMR is not just a problem for those of us who work in human health. It requires cooperation across sectors with a One Health approach that addresses the intimate links between the health of humans, animals, and our environment. World Antimicrobial Awareness Week draws attention to this complex global health problem.
The Director General of the World Health Organization, Tedros Adhanom Ghebreyesus. Meanwhile, the World Health Organization has unveiled a new strategy to tackle anti-malarial drug resistance in Africa as part of events marking World Antimicrobial Awareness Week. Sub-Saharan Africa accounts for a disproportionately high share of the global malaria burden, according to the UN. To fight against malaria, many prominent figures across the continent have joined the fight. Among them, Youssou N'Dour, Senegal's Grammy Award-winning singer and one of Africa's most prominent musicians. Outside music, he is widely known for his work as a long-time campaigner for malaria prevention in his native Senegal. I asked him why he decided to throw his weight behind malaria eradication.
We realize how the malaria affects Africa, certainly kids and pregnant women. And we know when we get the information, more than 1 million people died every year. And, something like that, you heard it, is a question, big question about you. And then I decide to be really involved behind this fight. First, we work a lot with rollback malaria. and have a lot of initiative, a lot of people, a lot of artists. And 2005, we organized here in Dakar big concert with more than 20 big name, African big name. And then we start to sensibilize people. And the second round was, to go meet the leaders, the world leaders. We met, a lot of people, the President of United States, France, the Premier Minister of England, and a lot of people. We talked to them about how important this fight. We need more money, more involved, and I think really we have a lot of resources. And the question is, we have the resources now. How we can resolve this problem? And this is our program we have for 2 years, and we start really good.
And now, who are your targets? Is it the urban people or the rural people, the poor people in the rural areas?
Yeah, the people who are affected about the things, who are living around, difficulties, and when the rain, the time it's raining here, a lot of trouble around the people. And I think those people need to realize before the hivernage come, they have to be ready to fight against malaria. I think it is really the people who need to be protected. No matter what, sometimes they are rural people, sometimes the urban people also. A lot of urban people have, this exposition about malaria.
And ultimately, what do you hope to achieve? Where do you hope to be with this project, let's say in the next 10 years?
Listen, one day I was in Washington, and then I see a picture, and was really picture when you see a lot of water around Washington. And then I asked, and they say long time ago was malaria day, a lot of mosquitoes. I say, yes, this is Washington. And today, people, one single person doesn't talk about mosquitoes or malaria. And I say, why people here resolve the problem, and why we didn't do it? We can't do it. And this is a big question. I think one day, 10 years is maybe too much. And the other thing is also, malaria affects our economy. We talk about $12 billion a year. We want to be developed. We want to be moving forward. We can't wait. And kids have afraid to go to school because of the malaria. People afraid to go to work because of malaria. We can't wait. It's about the world, the equilibrium of the world. This is why I think we have to move really faster.
Let's talk about Senegal. Do you think the government policies and programs are doing enough or are effective enough to fight against malaria in Senegal?
Yeah, definitely. We have, government program who doing very well since long time ago now, but we realize they can't resolve the problem they own. We need the other sector of the country. And what we're doing now is bring the government people, the religious people, sport people, artists and the university and USAID, everybody together. I think it's not no more the problem is the government, it's for the people, and people have to resolve the problem.
Iconic Senegalese singer and malaria prevention campaigner Youssou N'Dour speaking to me from Dakar. Now, on the last day of the United Nations Climate Summit, or COP27, in the Egyptian city of Sharm el-Sheikh, a 10-year-old Ghanaian climate activist received a standing ovation for her powerful message to the delegates and world leaders. Nakiat Dramani, a poet and Climate Vulnerable Forum ambassador for youth, recited her poem in her native language, telling world leaders to step up their game in fighting the climate crisis.
No matter what I do and no matter what all of the youth around do, this problem is too big. Please, climate delegates of the United Nations, be our heroes in Sharm el-Sheikh. I am closing, and in closing I would like to recite a verse from my poem. Mbofra nsam ye moborankasa, intim painful, ma hum enrenage wo hum bodo, hum di wum bodo, o sande say anshan ye ya, yen wiazi boboyen. All I mean is, duty bearers, kindly take up your game. Thank you very much for your attention.
Standing ovation there for Nakiat Dramani, a 10-year-old Ghanaian climate activist who was addressing the United Nations Climate Summit or COP27 in the Egyptian city of Sharm el-Sheikh. Well, it seems the delegates at the COP27 Climate Summit did in fact listen to young Nakiat, because at the end of the summit, they approved the creation of a special fund to compensate vulnerable nations for loss and damage from climate-induced disasters. This approval followed days of intense negotiations that stretched into early Sunday morning. The two-week talks have switched from fears the whole process could collapse to hopes of a major breakthrough on a fund for climate loss and damage. Delegates applauded after the fund was adopted early on Sunday, with African negotiators describing it as an important step. Developing countries made strong and repeated appeals for the establishment of a loss and damage fund to compensate the countries that are the most vulnerable to climate disasters, yet who have contributed little to the climate crisis. The UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres said the approval of the fund would not be enough, but described it as a much-needed political signal to rebuild broken trust. You are listening to Africa This Week on Home Digital FM with me, Bojang Jnr. A reminder of our top stories. A scuffle broke out in Sierra Leone's parliament as MPs exchanged blows and threw chairs at each other following a heated parliamentary debate on proportional representation. Ghana's embattled finance minister apologized to Ghanaians for the country's ongoing economic hardship, and Mali's military rulers banned all NGOs that are funded or supported by France from operating in Mali. Still ahead in the program, 80-year-old President Teodoro Obiang Nguema, who has been ruling Equatorial Guinea for the past 43 years, is on course to his sixth presidential term. And global police agency Interpol issued an international arrest warrant for Isabel dos Santos, Angolan billionaire and daughter of the country's former president. We also have sports and our special guest, a former Nigerian senator who was one time a lead negotiator between Boko Haram and the Nigerian government. Stay with us.
Africa This Week, coming to you from Home Digital 99.9 FM in the heart of Brikama.
Malawi's Anti-Corruption Bureau on Friday arrested the country's vice president, Solos Klaus Chilima, over alleged graft. In a statement, the corruption watchdog said Chilima would be taken to court where he was expected to be charged with 3 counts of corrupt practices by a public officer, among other charges. The statement alleged he was rewarded for assisting 2 companies connected to British businessman Zuneth Sattar to be awarded contracts by the Malawi government. South Africa's Supreme Court of Appeal on Monday ordered that former President Jacob Zuma be sent to prison to finish his sentence for contempt of court, ruling that the decision to release him on early medical parole was unlawful. Zuma was sentenced last year to 15 months imprisonment after ignoring a court order to testify at a government inquiry into widespread corruption during his 9 years as president. Zuma handed himself over to authorities in July last year and was released on medical parole 2 months later. Zimbabwean President Emmerson Mnangagwa has called on his compatriots to maintain peace ahead of next year's general elections. He made the call during the official opening of the 5th session of the 9th Parliament of Zimbabwe Wednesday. The 80-year-old Mnangagwa came to power in 2017 after the army forced a long-time ruler Robert Mugabe to step down. Speaking before lawmakers, Mnangagwa also reiterated calls for an end to economic sanctions imposed on Zimbabwe.
Political players seeking the people's mandate during the upcoming 2023 harmonized general elections must maintain and consolidate the current peace, unity, harmony, and love that we have built. The need for the unconditional removal of sanctions, which have constrained socioeconomic growth for decades, remains urgent and imperative.
Zimbabwean President Emmerson Mnangagwa. The Health Services Board in Zimbabwe has said that health workers have left the country in droves over the past year. HSB chairperson Dr. Paulinho Sikosana told Reuters that more than 4,000 health workers have left since 2021, including more than 1,700 registered nurses who resigned last year and more than 900 who left this year. Doctors and nurses in Zimbabwe have found work mainly in the UK, leaving their country's health sector in dire straits and local hospitals understaffed. Billionaire philanthropist and Microsoft founder Bill Gates has pledged $7 billion in development funds to Africa. On a visit to Kenya during the week, Gates announced the money would be spent over the next 4 years to improve health, gender equality, and farming on the continent. He warned that the Ukraine crisis was reducing the amount of aid flowing to the developing countries.
I'm the biggest advocate for rich country generosity to developing countries. Whether it's U.S. political leaders, European political leaders. I was in Japan and South Korea a couple months ago. I think we have to be realistic that there's not going to be a check that funds every bad weather event. But we need, to have, in terms of justice, increased generosity. It does come at a tough time because the European budgets are deeply affected by the Ukraine war. And so right now the trend for aid is not to go up. If you take all aid, including all climate aid, we're going to have a few years here where it'll probably go down.
Billionaire philanthropist and Microsoft founder Bill Gates speaking in Nairobi, Kenya. Global police agency Interpol has issued an international arrest warrant for Isabel dos Santos, Angolan billionaire and daughter of the country's former president. According to Portugal's Lusa news agency, citing an official document, the Interpol warrant was issued after Angola's public prosecutors requested the agency to locate, arrest, and extradite dos Santos. Citing an official document, Lusa said the 49-year-old businesswoman was wanted for alleged offenses including embezzlement, fraud, influence peddling, and money laundering. Dos Santos has for years faced accusations of corruption, including a 2020 allegation by Angola that during her father's presidency, she and her husband steered $1 billion in state funds to companies they held stakes in. Isabel's father, Jose Eduardo dos Santos, ruled Angola from 1979 to 2017. He died in July this year. Now to Equatorial Guinea, where 80-year-old President Teodoro Obiang Nguema, who has been ruling the oil-rich country for the past 43 years, is on course to a sixth presidential term. The world's longest-serving president, Obiang has won every single election in the last 43 years, overwhelmingly getting more than 90% of votes. Preliminary results from last Sunday's election so far gave him at least 96.5%. He has ruled Equatorial Guinea since August 1979, overseeing a regime notorious for crushing dissent and fearing coups. Tutu Alicante is a human rights lawyer from Equatorial Guinea. He's also the executive director of EG Justice, the world's first NGO focusing on human rights issues in Equatorial Guinea.
The fact that Obiang is going to win, for most people in Equatorial Guinea, confirmed three things. One, that this is a person, Obiang, that does not care about the future of the country, the well-being of Equatorial Guinea. And second, it confirms what many of us have been saying, somewhat what many people doubting, and that is that the West, the international community, does not care about democracy in places like Equatorial Guinea, many African countries, as long as their economic and national security interests are at stake, right? They only care about, in the case of Equatorial Guinea, oil and gas, quite frankly. And then the third thing that it confirms is what some of us fear, right? The likelihood of violence. When you make peaceful revolution, peaceful democracy impossible, you make violent revolution inevitable. I do not like what happens in many places in Africa where you have coup d'etats. But when a government is willing to hold on to power undemocratically for decades, it gives citizens no other options but to start looking at violence or looking at any other means to restore some sense of legitimacy to a government. And more people in Equatorial Guinea now are going to be looking at other means to change this regime that's now been in power for 43 years.
And to give us an overview or take us through to what is happening in Equatorial Guinea, the people of Equatorial Guinea, when it comes to not just economic issues, despite the fact that the country is very rich, the people are poor, very poor, but also human rights issues in Equatorial Guinea.
President Obiang has been in power since August 3rd, 1973. That is longer than any serving rule of state, except for kings and queens, right? And on those 43 years, he has managed to establish a perfect kleptocracy. That means a government or a group of people, they have held on to government not for the purpose of governing, serving the people, but rather for the purpose of stealing the resources of this country. And in order to steal the resources of this country with absolute impunity, they have recurred to using the military to repress people. They have completely eliminated the role of the parliament. So we have 175 people in parliament, all members of the ruling party, and just serving as a rubber stamp for whatever President Obiang wants. They have completely undermined the role of the judiciary. If you have any sort of case in Equatorial Guinea today, you do not take it to the judiciary because you know how it's going to end, right? And then they have completely eliminated independent media and independent civil society. So what you have is a complete state capture by one family who is only holding on to the levers of government for the purpose of enriching themselves. And to keep enriching themselves, they will commit any human rights violations. Every single day, people are tortured in Equatorial Guinea, in the prisons of Equatorial Guinea. As we speak, right before elections on October 29th, 175 members of one political party, Citizens for Innovation, were arrested, right? Including the leader of that party, Gabriel Nzeobiang, who was publicly beaten in the streets of Malabo.
Tutu Ali Kante, a human rights lawyer from Equatorial Guinea and the executive director of EG Justice, the world's first NGO focusing on human rights issues in Equatorial Guinea. The head of the UN Conference on Trade and Development has said that a shipment of Russian fertilizers was scheduled to leave a Norwegian port last Monday, bound for Malawi, helping to ease a backlog of 300,000 tons of agricultural products currently in European ports. Speaking at a news briefing in Geneva Monday, Rebecca Greenspan described the shipment as good news, saying it would help address global food shortages. French President Emmanuel Macron has accused Russia of feeding anti-French propaganda in Africa to serve what he called predatory ambitions in troubled African nations, where France has suffered military setbacks and a wider loss of influence over recent years. Speaking on the sidelines of a summit of French-speaking nations in Tunisia over the week, Macron was asked to respond to critics who say France exploits historic economic and political ties in its former colonies to serve its own interests. The French leader said this perception was fed by others as a political project. He said a number of powers who wanted to spread their influence in Africa were doing this to hurt France, hurt its language, sow doubts, but above all, pursue certain interests. France, the former colonial power in most of Western and Central Africa, has long-standing military ties across Francophone Africa, and French troops were stationed in Mali for a decade as part of a counter-terrorism operation. Critics described France's operation as a failure and blamed it for destabilizing the region further. It has also been jockeying for influence with Russia in recent years, with the deployment of private military contractor Wagner Group in several countries, including in the Central African Republic and Mali. African leaders have declared a ceasefire in Eastern Democratic Republic of Congo starting last Friday, which was aimed in particular at stopping attacks by the M23 rebel group. The declaration was issued by the leaders of Congo, Rwanda, Burundi, and Angola, and former Kenyan President Uhuru Kenyatta after a summit in the Angolan capital Luanda on Wednesday. Eastern Congo is facing an insurgency by the M23, a Tutsi-led rebel group which the Congolese government claims is supported by neighboring Rwanda. In addition to the ceasefire, the statement said the M23 must withdraw from its occupied territories or face intervention by regional forces. A media watchdog in Somalia has accused the Somali government of pressuring one of its leaders to stop criticizing them. Abdallah Ahmed Mumin, Secretary General of the Somali Journalist Syndicate SJS, is out on bail after 2 arrests in October for what officials call security-related charges. But the SJS alleged that Ministry of Information representatives approached it with an offer to drop those charges on condition that Mumin ceased his media advocacy and avoided future criticism of authorities. The SJS said the ministry also demanded that the association apologize and agreed to abide by an October 8 directive banning the dissemination of content from Al-Shabaab insurgency group.
Let's go!
Now time for sports. The World Cup is in high gear in Qatar. Senegal on Friday beat the hosts Qatar after a 2-0 loss to the Netherlands in their opening match. The 3-1 win over Qatar means Senegal has a chance of qualifying to the next stage when they meet Ecuador on Tuesday. North African teams Tunisia and Morocco managed goalless draws in their first games against Denmark and Croatia respectively, but it was a poor start for Cameroon and Ghana. On Thursday, Portugal withstood a late scare to beat Ghana 3-2. A controversial 63rd minute penalty by Cristiano Ronaldo put Portugal on the way to victory, with all the goals coming in the second half hour. Here are some Ghanaian fans in Qatar reacting to the results and the game. This sound is courtesy of Sahara Football YouTube channel.
Well, it's just unfortunate we lost this game. Clearly, we came in with a game plan, and until the first goal came through that penalty, it worked perfectly well for Tuado. And then we managed to get an equalizer, and I thought that the changes the coach made, especially with the Kudus Mohamed change, it came way too early, because Kudus Mohamed was the only player who was a threat on the pitch for the Portuguese. But just when you took Kudus Mohamed out, it created a hole. We've played one game, we've lost, we have 2 more matches to go. We've got the game against Uruguay and against South Korea. These are games that are winnable.
Disappointing defeat. Probably not a game Ghana should have lost. I thought game management wasn't the best. They were facing the game that were encouraged, and I was encouraged. I thought the game plan was working until the substitution after the Ghana's equalizer, because I'm thinking the first half was to frustrate Portugal as much as possible, take the game to the second half, and then use the pace we have on our bench to maybe counter them. So the first half, Portugal were frustrated. They barely created anything. Atizigi was free. The back 5 at times, Daxis was decent. We conceded the midfield to them, but they couldn't penetrate, which was decent, which was fine. Then in the second half, once Portugal got their goal through the penalty, we responded well. And I thought, having responded, we were going to go back to what we were doing the first half in the next 2, 3, 4, 5 minutes, frustrate them as much as we can, and then see where that takes us, because as the game goes on, we've got a lot of young, pacey players on the bench who could have answered Samuel Bukari, who got a goal, could have come on to cause problems. But that didn't happen. Then Portugal also made, I won't say a mistake, but made a decision that Otoado also made 3 substitutions, and also their team got derailed.
Ghanaian fans in Qatar reacting to their team's loss to Portugal on Thursday. Cameroon's indomitable Lions earlier on Thursday lost to Switzerland after Bril Embolo, a Swiss national of Cameroonian origin, scored the only goal as Switzerland's World Cup campaign got off to a winning start. Embolo chose not to celebrate after his second-half strike against his country of birth. In what was a game that lacked many chances, it was Cameroon who started the brighter of the two sides, but the Swiss comfortably held on to secure that crucial opening win. At the end of the match, Cameroonian fans outside the stadium shared their reactions with Equinox TV, a Cameroonian channel.
My name is Dr. Corentin Tala. Everybody knows me in Cameroon like General Schwarzkopf. I was very pleased with the first half of the game. We played very well, but the second phase of the game was very distasteful. At the end, the defense were playing as if we were winning the game. We were supposed to play forward, but we were playing backward, which was good. And then we lost a lot of passes.
It was a good match as compared to what we see during the preseason or during the warm-up matches, the friendlies. It was good during the first half, but the tactical changes the coach made, I'm sure it is what cost us the defeat.
They really put up a very good show. We are impressed about what they showed as compared to the friendly games they played before. In a game of football, there's always a winner and there is a loser. I believe in the next match, we are going to come out strong.
During the second half, the changes that were made, I think by my perception, I don't think they were very good, especially the attack changes.
I agree with the replacement of the song in the last minute. That wasn't a good replacement because both people that went into the stadium, they did not very perform well. They could have left Choupo-Moting or one of Choupo-Moting or Ekambi and put somebody else.
Cameroonian football fans in Qatar. Now time for our special guest segment. Boko Haram militants Tuesday killed at least 10 Chadian soldiers in an attack on a military unit in Lake Chad province near the Nigerian border, according to a statement issued by Chad's government. The Boko Haram insurgency, which erupted in northeast Nigeria in 2009, has killed more than 350,000 people and forced millions to flee their homes. The group has spread to the swampy Lake Chad zone in the west of the country, where the armies of Chad, Nigeria, and Niger have been fighting the Islamist militants for years. One man who demonstrably knows a lot about Boko Haram is prominent Nigerian political activist and former Senator Shehu Sani. He was one time a lead negotiator between the insurgency group and the government of Nigeria during the presidency of Goodluck Jonathan. For a group that never negotiated and never trust anyone, it uncomfortably trusted Shehu Sani, who is this week's special guest.
The insurgency has taken its tolls on the life of our people, on the peace of our country. It has threatened our democracy, our unity, and it has today also threatened our elections. So I'm of the view there is a need for a multinational force to be able to secure towns and villages that have been infested by these insurgents. And also there is a need to keep open the window of dialogue to explore the possibility of minimizing damage and carnage. But we also need to understand that as Africans, that this problem is becoming a regional problem, a continental problem, and which requires a continental and global action. But also there should be a window of opportunity for dialogue. It should be kept open. In fact, dialogues works better when force is also applied to a certain degree.
So how much force should this force be applied?
The limitations of force should reach out to areas of securing borders, preventing further attacks and kidnappings, and also containing the situation as it is. Because if you don't do anything, it will keep spreading and more people will be killed, more people will be abducted, and that makes the situation worse. So we are talking about a situation of now containing the cancer and ensuring that it doesn't continuously spread. It is once in a city in northern Nigeria, and it has spread to Cameroon, Chad, and Niger Republic, and if care is not taken, it can spill over up to Sudan and Central African Republic.
From the days you were negotiating between the government and Boko Haram, what has changed so far with Boko Haram in terms of tactics, in terms of agenda and want?
I think the failure of negotiation has made it easier for the group to capitalize and expand its activities. When negotiation was going on, the attacks were minimal, as both sides are hopeful. But the moment the negotiation reached a stalemate, and then they simply took the war option. And this is where we find ourselves. And we should understand clearly that both approaches are necessary to complement each other and to also achieve results from both sides. Negotiation failed for the simple fact that the people whom the group wanted them to be released, the government is not prepared to release them. The insurgents gave me 16 names. They gave us as a committee 16 names for which we should release those 16 persons, and we should tell the government to release those 16 persons, and they are prepared to release the girls. But
you're talking about the Chibok girls?
Yes, of course. But they couldn't, the government or the security agencies refused to release those ones and choose to release only very few on conditions. And then the insurgents said they have closed down the window of negotiation as long as all those persons are not going to be released.
Who are these people that they asked to be released? How grave is their crime that the government refused to release them in order to secure the release of those poor girls?
The submission by the members of the group is that those persons are dear to them and they should be released. And what the security agencies told us was that those guys have committed heinous crimes and they cannot release them. And the crimes they are perpetrated, they are certainly not going to release them. So I think this is what became the issue and how the whole thing came to an end.
And Mr. Sani, when you talk about Boko Haram, especially out of Nigeria, people just go by their names, look at their name and see what they are fighting for, what they stand for, and where they are taking their fight. That is, they are against Western education. Is that just it?
Well, initially that was the igniting point, but later they grew into a full-fledged guerrilla insurgency with an ideology that is Islamist and with also an ambition of conquering territories and imposing their own version of Islamic rule. So it's not simply about fighting Western education, it's about a group with an agenda to control a state and the levers of power.
And in this quest, oftentimes they will attack even Muslim communities, mosques, as well as Muslim leaders. Would you say this is just a group confusing their ideologies and what they are fighting for?
Yeah, they don't target only Christians. They target Muslims who refuse to accept their own version of extremism. They are attacking police stations, government locations, abducting people, recruiting children. So it's not simply an insurgent group determined to attack Christians or killing Christians alone. Anybody who is opposed to them, irrespective of your religious affiliations, they see you as an enemy, and that is how it is.
And some say in fighting Boko Haram, the Nigerian government and the Nigerian security forces are fighting an invisible enemy. Do you think the Nigerian government, Nigerian security forces know the enemy that they are fighting, like identity of the enemy? Because oftentimes you only hear Sekau's name, not much.
Well, in all terrorist groups, you don't hear names of too many people. In Al-Qaeda, it's only you heard of Osama bin Laden and Ayman al-Zawahiri and a few others. In ISIS, you only see the leader. Likewise, in Al-Shabaab of Somalia, So, look, also in Boko Haram of Nigeria, I think they have a common strategy of simply making open the identity of their leader, but all other ones remains closed or anonymous. So I think it's part of their strategy.
That was Husani, our special guest and former Nigerian senator and negotiator between the Boko Haram and the Nigerian government. That brings us to the end of this edition of your Week in Review program, Africa This Week, on Home Digital 99.9 FM. I'm your producer and presenter, Bojang Jnr. Thanks for your company and join me the same time next week for another edition of the program.